Officers on the pursuit call. Suspect vehicle was last seen heading north near the power station. Containment will be set up ahead of his last known direction of travel. This call is still code 6. Handle on TAC 3.
Alright, new video. Today we're going to be going over this. So for those that don't know, or those new to the channel, I'll re-explain it. I've had a transmission issue with this car for a while. I narrowed it down to the shifter. The issue was that if I went into first gear, it would go in fine, but the moment I tried to go into second, it would grind going into second every single time. And this transmission I've had rebuilt, all the internal gearing and everything like that, so it should all be basically new. I haven't really driven this thing. I realized that it was a shifter when instinctively in some test drives, I knew the second gear grinded every time, so I just stopped using it. I would go from first into third and just keep it pushing. But instinctively in some situations, I would go into second gear and it would go into second gear without grinding. However, at the same time that it did that, it would go into first with the grind every time from that point on. So I realized that it wasn't the transmission, it was the shifter relocation that I had that was like ever so slightly subtly shifting around down there. And that was the gktech version 1 shifter relocation for this CD009. And that metal bracket is really flimsy compared to this billet aluminum, CNC aluminum. This is solid. This doesn't flex in any shape or fashion left or right, but that one, when I had it, you go left to right and it does flex, and I think that's what the problem was. So this video is to go over how to install the Sikky conversion. This is a brand new product to the market. Just came out. I got one of the first ones. This goes over how to install this while it's inside the car. They have a great install video of it while it's a transmission on the bench. But I wanted to go ahead and show how to install this while it's in the car, while the transmission's in the car, so you can see that process. This is a S14 with a CD009 transmission. So that's the application that you're looking at. But with that being said, all right, so we're under the car. I'm gonna try my best to like get this stuff to capture on camera. I got the drive shaft out. So this is what we're looking at. This is the gktech shifter V1. And here's some notes that I have. I haven't gotten the Sikky one yet, but here's some notes that I have that's different from the version 1 gktech to the Sikky design, and even the CD009 one. So main thing with my reasoning for getting it is the less points of failure, the less opportunities of failure, the better. gktech has the most, or the version 1, I don't know what the version 2 looks like, but out of all three of those, gktech has the most points of failure. So when it comes to your adjustability, if you look up here, this is right off of the top of the transmission. There are 2 shims there, and I believe they supply you with 3 different types of shims that you can mix and match for the top adjustability. So that's 3 different types of shims. What is that, like 9 combinations up top? Then down here on the bottom mount, you see it's bolted in, but there's a second hole over here. That's 2 types of adjustability on the side of the transmission as well. So you got 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different ways that this could end up going into your car. 13 levels of adjustability. I don't need all that. I'd rather stick with the Sikky's version of having 2 because that's less ways that I gotta play with it, less time for install, less opportunity for me to get it wrong. The other thing is these from the bottom. The Sikky shifter only has those 2 bolts that come in the bottom right there, and that's it. And they're bigger than that. They're not Allen keys and all that stuff, so that's simpler, and that's really it. And comparing this to the CD009 one, the CD009 one uses the top and bottom mount as well, whereas the Sikky one only uses the top. So you don't have to worry about this at all, adjusting this at all, because you don't use them with the Sikky one. But CD009 and gktech, you'll need to adjust both. So that's another thing that I'm kind of like, I'm good on in terms of adjustability. But I did want to come down here and show it. One other thing is this is a dust shield for the drive shaft that you probably will have to remove because, like I said, the Sikky one mounts to those bolts and they're bottom up. So to get there, you got to go through here. You're probably going to have to move this. Now, I have a slightly bigger drive shaft, but it still fits in here. Some people have even bigger drive shafts than that, and they've already removed this. So I'm going to try to remove this. The only thing is, this is basically you just hammer it off from the back. So you got to find a way to get something back here and then pop it off. So that'll probably take a lot of time of me prying and figuring out where I could best get it while I'm in the car. But once I have this off, gktech two bolts up top, and then the whole thing kind of comes off once you get it out of here. We got these 2 bolts out for the gktech. I did cut I cut this much off of the dust shield to see if I can get the bolts in from the bottom. We'll see if that's enough. If not, I'll cut a little bit more and then like kind of smooth this out. But for now, I'm gonna go up top and try to get the rest of the shifter out. There's 2 bolts on either side of this, and then there's the main shifter bolts as well that are also accessible from up top, and then this should be able to come out and we can get started with the install. Alright, so once you got all that stuff out, this is kind of the last step of removing the gktech shifter. You'll probably have to punch this out to get this off the back of the transmission. And then once you have this out, you can start actually installing the Sikky one. But this was the main thing I was worried about, being able to actually have access to punch this out from inside the vehicle while the transmission was in the car. And I think that I do have the space for it. It kind of goes in this area, but I'm sure I could get a punch on it to kind of come up here and knock that out. I've been messing around with this for a little minute, and I found the best way for me to get this back out is to put it in first. So that is pull back or over and then back. That puts it in first. And hit it from the bottom out this way. It's going to take a long time, but it is slowly coming out. I'm going to hit it until I can get some grips on it. These. And then see if I could just yank it on out. I did end up losing one of my punches inside of this thing, but I was able to grab the next size and still get it punched out. So we're good. And this should just slide off now, right? All right, and this is your starting point. Make sure that this shaft is completely round. Otherwise, the other part's you're gonna have some difficulty sliding that off. I got this little flap or whatever thing. It's like a little bit of metal that's creased or something like that on mine. I just took a Dremel and grinded the outside shaft smooth, and it slid right off. So that means that the new one should slide right on. But yeah, this is pretty much where we start the install. First things first is we got to disassemble the shifter to get the piece that slides onto here on. Let's go ahead and do that. And then after that, it's really pretty self-explanatory from the video they have. So things first, after all that, when you buy the kit, you get the shifter, you get the spacers, you get the 2 bolts that bolted in, and they also give you Loctite. I'm not sure if you get 1 or 2 with the shifter alone, because you have to buy this separate. In my case, it's just the clamp and the shift rod. You could get an offset clamp as well. It just kind of depends on your application. Mine is probably going to be sitting about right here if it goes straight up, so I went for the straight up clamp. But yeah, so that's what you get with the shifter, and then you order the rod and whatever offset you need clamp separate. And there's that. First step with this is you have to take off this bottom piece. So this little circular piece that my finger is on, this is what fits around there. And in order to take it off, 4 Allen screws, and then you can separate this piece. So let's do that. Okay, so once you get those out, this is pretty much what you got to work with. This is how precisely machined this is. So there's a plate here. I'm gonna take that off, and then this will pop out like so. And you can kind of do it with or without the rubber piece, but in the video they do it without. So I'm gonna take this off. All right, so that's with everything off. Lay those to the side. You're gonna put them back on for sure, but this is the new piece that goes on to here. So you'll line it up to get it on there like so, and you'll line it up with that hole. And once you got that lined up, then it is this black rod that goes through both of them. And that's how you keep it lined up with the actual transmission and keep the shifter lined up and everything like that. So I'm gonna take this out, and we're going to start this in here before we hammer it all the way in. I use the vise just to hold it and get it started. So notice that it's not coming through on the bottom side. I didn't put it all the way in. Just wanted to get it started out here, so it's easier to do in the car. If you have a vise for that, it makes it 10 times easier. If not, you'll probably have to figure out how to do it on the actual transmission, or find a way to hold this down while you get this thing started. All right, so I got it on, and then I tapped it a little bit more for this to start going through here. Now you see how I could barely move it? That's because it's ever so slightly inside the hole here, which lines it up to the transmission. And then you just kind of hammer it all the way through, hammer it home. Take your time, don't rush it or anything like that. It'll come with time. And then once you get it all the way through, you move on to the next step. So pay attention here, because this is where it gets kind of confusing, and it all depends on what transmission you got. So in the video that they have for install, they are using a new CD009 transmission, one that you can get pretty much right now from Nissan. This is a old CD009 transmission, and the spacers can only be ran 2 ways, one for new, one for old. Here's a little way to identify it. I'll do the visual just because they had it on theirs. So you see how there's threads at the bottom, but there's this space of no threads at the top? That's how you know it's an older CD009. If it had threads all the way through, then it's a newer CD009. And let's see, when it comes to the old CD009, this is how the spacer is to be set up. Hopefully that doesn't fall. You're going to use the front hole on this one. This will go on top. And you're going to use this on the bottom. So this will mount down here. This only has one hole. So you'll mount it down here. It slides right in because of that groove that they made. Very good machining job. And then this one will go up here, and you'll bolt it to the front hole. And then in between these is that gray plate. And that's how you run it for the old model transmissions. I got the shifter in the location. This is for S14. This is where the shifter will put it. Okay, keep in mind, this is the original, like this curvature right here, this is the original shifter location, and this is sitting back by that much. So you may have to cut a little bit to fit it, but overall this is pretty decent shifting position wise. Of course, it's not tightened down. The bolts go in from the top, and then the nuts will come in from the bottom. Make sure to use the thread locker. Right now I have the top spacers in, in the front hole, and I'm about to go underneath to put the spacers for the bottom in. But I just wanted to get the top ones in so that I can thread these down and have something at least holding this in, so that when I go down there to maneuver those other ones in, it doesn't just fall off. All right, so I am gonna be honest. It's pretty. It takes some finagling to get this in with both spacers, the top and the bottom one. It basically is designed to just go straight on like this way. So keep that in mind. I had to take the top bolts out, put the spacers in, and then try to slide it forward as much as I could. And then once I got it on there, I put the bolts back in and kind of like maneuvered it ever so slightly to get everything kind of lined up. This one is still a little bit off, but once the bolt threads all the way through, it'll line up. This one is fine. And so again, just keep that in mind. And then it does look like, so here you can see it from here, that dust shield does cover up the bolt. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make a cut from here to here, just straight down, and cut off these two side pieces instead of going all the way around, just so I could gain access to tighten down these bolts. Back underneath the car again, putting on the nuts, and I was actually just barely able to get this one on there. So I might not need to cut it at all. What I'm gonna do is take some thread locker, pop it on both of these before tightening it up. I also put this back into neutral so that it could be a little bit easier to get the bottom part back on since it's lined up with the neutral position. But yeah, thread locker on these, tighten them up, and then the last thing would be putting this back together on the bottom, of course. Right, so putting it back together, they do give you this super lube grease. Makes it a little bit easier to get that rubber boot back on. So just gonna put a decent, little decent amount on the bottom of this. Rub that around. There we go. Because you take it and you put it back the same way that you get or that you took it off. Last thing to come off was the rubber boot. This piece. So just want to get that started up and around. This piece I might need two hands. Okay, so that's on there. I did have to use two hands. Next piece is going to be this ring. This goes over the boot. So I'm going to have to use two hands again, but this is on the back of it. Like so. And see those little lips? They go in between the bolt holes, because the last piece is the cap, which is going to go just like that. You have to put the hardware in, but keep in mind that the boot tucks into the cap and the silver piece locks the boot in place. As for the hardware, it's those ones that we first took off. Put a little bit of Loctite on them, because if it does for some reason vibrate loose, remember where this is. This is directly above the drive shaft. So if you're gonna correct that, you gotta take the drive shaft out. And not to mention, if this vibrates loose while you're driving, you're probably not going to get it back. So, yeah. All right, so after you finish that last step, you're pretty much ready to go. Your shifter is going to be different depending on which one you ordered. If you got the clamp and the rod to match the clamp, then it's just 1, 2, 3, 4 Allen keys. And I would put thread locker on those as well, because you don't want this to pop up while driving. And then that's pretty much done, and you get to go. So you can see we got first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and if you want some of that reverse lockout action, you see you can't go into it without pushing down, going all the way over, and then coming back. Seems to be working. We'll see if it has the same issue as the gktech one did when the car is running and driving. Well, it is running and driving, it's just I got other stuff to do. So I'll probably post an update video once I have it on the... I'd say overall with this one, I'm very impressed of the machining and the ease of install. So the install probably took about maybe 3 hours total. And that's including like cutting and all that stuff, like everything that you see, about 3 hours. And that's 3 hours with me recording it actively. If I probably was just in here knocking it out, it probably would have took maybe an hour and a half. But since you're recording it, it takes a whole lot longer. So ease of install, it's very solid. There's no flex or anything like that. It's straight up doing what it's supposed to do. It works the way it's supposed to do. And the machining is so precise. Like, even with the spacers that go in here, the machining is so precise, it's really kind of almost impossible to mess up the install with this. For those of you that don't want a reverse lockout for whatever reason, you can remove it if you take those bolts out, but I'm not touching it. I like the reverse lockout. It also lets me know, it also prevents me from going too far to the right when I'm trying to get to 6, because second, for the CD009 at least, third and sixth are really close to each other. So just look at the difference right there. Those are really close, really close. And since this blocker is right here that prevents you from going any farther, it lines up with 6th perfectly, so you can get up in there every time as well. So yeah, overall very impressed with it. I feel like this does solve my issue, and I actually can't wait to drive the car. So we go from there.